Welcome to One-on-One with Walt Lascos. In this brief podcast, you'll learn how to most effectively address senior financial exploitation. Now, here's Walt.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, One-on-One with Walt Lascos. I'm Walt Lascos, and joining me today is a very featured guest. I am privileged and honored to have with us Dr. Jessica Choplin. The doctor is a professor of psychological science at DePaul University in Chicago. Dr. Choplin, thank you for giving us some time today to share your thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Choplin, when it comes to studying the persuasive influence of con artists on scam victims, for me, I've come to give much more attentive to the victim's mental state of being. The scammer knows how to manipulate the victim's mindset, but I'm learning that it's a much easier task for the scammer when the victim is dealing with anxiety and other issues, and this can be referred to as the victim's window of tolerance. Would you please explain what this window of tolerance is, what it's all about?
Yes, so the concept of window of tolerance was developed by Dan Siegel, and the basic idea, it's a metaphor from therapy, from clinical psychology, and the idea is that if people are too riled up, and they're under stress, they're just activated in those ways, they will make poor judgments. And the same thing, of course, if they have too low level of activation, if they're if they're too sleepy or they're depressed. So you really want to be in the middle, and that's the concept of a window. And people who are in that have a shot at being able to catch the person who's trying to perpetrate the scam. There's still lots of pitfalls that people would have even when they're inside the window of tolerance, but when they're outside of that window, it's almost impossible.
So it really does seem like, and I guess that's what I'm getting at here, that it's much more than just some con artist contacting a person, let's say an elderly man or woman, and basically getting them to act without thinking, getting their emotions all riled up, and being very successful then in getting them to go out and do something where they're turning over their life savings. How that individual is, how they are in their day-to-day life at that moment in time, contributes a lot to their vulnerability, I guess we could say then, right? Given that window of tolerance. And
exactly.
Yeah, and the other part of that bothers me is when I think about all the talk that you have today about Social Security and how there may be Social Security cuts, a lot of fear that it's being placed out there right now about this. I could see that putting a lot of older adults in a situation where they might be having a lot of anxiety, worry about, their life savings or the monthly payments that they get from Social Security, covering the bills. And could that then make them more susceptible to scammers? And oh my God, it sounds like the scammers could have a field day today.
Exactly, absolutely. Once they're that high level of arousal because they're worried about those issues, then they get desperate, and then they're more likely to be victimized.
And so much is also tied in with this, with like losing a loved one. A lot of elderly folks, you get to a situation where you get to be a certain age, and suddenly a lot of my friends or a lot of relatives my age are suddenly dying. That puts them, puts them in a certain mindset that there's always that constant situation of anxiety. So are we kind of saying that perhaps in some ways, older folks, is there any hope here? I hate to draw a stark picture, but you wonder about what can older adults do to try and help themselves stay within let's say, a positive window of tolerance where they might be most suited to be able to protect themselves and not fall victim to a scam.
Absolutely. So studies do show that people who have lost a loved one are disproportionately victims of fraud. So that's something that's definitely, a point of vulnerability. Interestingly, though, studies show that older adults are not disproportionately victimized, despite the fact that we know that they have many, many vulnerabilities. We know that the working memory is lower. We know that there's source memory issues. There's a number of cognitive vulnerabilities and emotional vulnerabilities, like you pointed out, if you lose a loved one. But they also have lots of strengths. So they have a wealth of experience to draw from. So they might actually spot things that a younger person wouldn't, just because they've had earlier experiences. Older adults who do have a supportive network, in particular, seem to have some protection. So it's not all dark for older adults. It seems to be a combination of vulnerabilities, but also strengths.
Interesting. So what I'm learning from you, Doctor, is that in dealing with older folks, so I do a lot of educational forums where I try to provide older adults with information of an educational nature of how to stay safe and prevent themselves from becoming a victim of scam. I really probably should underscore then for a lot of them the wealth of experience that they have accumulated throughout their life, and to rely on that and reach deep into their pockets of that experience when they get a situation where they might get a phone call or being told to do something that sounds kind of fishy or scammy, as well as the importance of the network of friends. And I feel a little bit bad about that, Doctor, because I know a lot of older adults that, for the most part, maybe sit alone, sit in their room, watch TV all day, and and you try. I've tried how many times to really emphasize the importance of going to the senior center, doing something. You need to socialize. You need to get up and out with your network. So that really is important for older adults, is what I'm hearing you're saying, in terms of being a tool or a resource that makes them stronger to prevent themselves from becoming a victim.
Absolutely. Lonely older adults are particularly vulnerable. So it is very important to have some type of social network. It can be at your religious institution. It can be they may have adult children, grandchildren, but it's really important that they have some type of supportive social network.
And one of the most challenging issues we face today in dealing with a person who is being manipulated by a scammer is an ability to convince that victim that he or she is being scammed. And I see this as being particularly true in the situation of romance scams. I find it to be, and I find those situations to be very similar to dealing with people who are members of a cult. However, I've been reflecting a lot about the power of empathy and its ability to unleash the victim from a scammer's influence. So that said, how would you view empathy in the process of helping a victim become more to a realization that they are being scammed?
Yeah. So there aren't going to be any magic bullets, right? So empathy is not going to solve everything, but empathy does lay the stage for possible success. It has a number of things. It puts people in what we call a parasympathetic state, which is a state of your nervous system in which you're calmer. And that's almost a prerequisite for being able to, think through an issue. It encourages what we call metacognition, where they can think about their thinking. They can like realize that they maybe rushed through something, came to quick judgments, and they can rethink the way that they've been thinking. Also, when you're in that type of state, it can slow you down, make you less defensive. So if there's a lot of issues that you need to think through, you have a high cognitive load, you can take things one at a time because you're just slower and calmer. And that's the time in which you can ask questions, which if you are in a high state of arousal, you have difficulty, and you don't feel safe, you're not going to feel safe to ask questions and think things through. So yeah, that's the power of empathy, because you want to set the stage for success. Whether it'll actually protect the person, that's another question, but at least you can do that to sort of set the stage.
Exactly.
To help them.
And, because I see it as like a conduit to be able to achieve some type of a trustful relationship between yourself and the victim. Because up until that point, it seems like the victim is placing their trust in the scammer, in the con artist, and pursuing, doing whatever that con artist is having them do. So my argument is, or I guess what I could say is, I advocate for a lot of individuals that work in banks or credit unions that are on the front lines, or branch managers. You have someone that comes in, they want to withdraw $10,000, and you get them talking, and all of a sudden you find out that, well, there's somebody in the Philippines that, they're really my lost love, and if I send them the money, they're going to fly here, and we're going to get married. And you realize that's the basic scam, right? How to deal with it. Well, rather than to be judgmental, rather than to be straight up of talking about you're being scammed, stop it, you don't want to send the money. I believe the way to proceed through a process of helping that individual come to a realization that they're being scammed is by establishing some type of bond of trust, and that begins with empathy, with being able to walk in their shoes, showing that you understand where they're at. Maybe it's realization that they are lonely and they live all alone, and this is the only person that's bringing any kind of happiness to them in their life, and and engaging them that way. And I guess I want to say is that I find, or my advice to those in situations like that is to really become more sensitive to walking in the shoes of that victim, expressing empathy to them, establishing that, because I believe that does set you on a path where you can then, let's say, disarm them from that scammer. Am I correct in my thinking on that?
Absolutely. So empathy does all those things that we talked about to sort of set the stage for potentially helping the person. You need to stay calm, because you want them in a parasympathetic state, a calm state where they can actually slow down and think things through. And going too slow and systematically is also really important. One distinction that we make as decision-making researchers is between what we call type 1 processing versus type 2 processing. Type 1 processing is very fast. You're going on quick, shortcuts, mental shortcuts, and relying on just fast ways of thinking. And that's not the way to avoid a scam. What you really want to be doing is what we call type 2 processing, where you're slowing down. If there are a bunch of issues, you can think things through one at a time, and just be more systematic in your thinking. That can set the stage for success as well.
So, Dr. Choplin, any last guidance to offer to those who, let's say, work as tellers or branch managers and who may eventually find themselves dealing with a customer who is obviously under the influence of a scammer?
Well, first, there aren't going to be any magic bullets, as we said earlier. It's going to be very difficult to talk them down. So nothing is going to be magic. But if you can stay calm, if you get them in a more relaxed state, if you can show them empathy, that their situation is understandable, where they can ask questions, where they can be calm and take things one step at a time, where they won't be defensive, and then just take it slow, walk things through one issue at a time. And if they can go through that slowly, and they can think through the issues, then there might be a shot at it. But if they get defensive, they get riled up, they get upset, they're not going to be thinking through things systematically, slowly, one thing at a time.
So it really is essential for them to be more in a calm state in order to be able to make sense of the situation or deal with their situation and facilitate that conversation that helps them realize that they are being scammed.
Exactly.
So, Doctor, as we wrap up, I think it's be very important if for you to also share, if anyone has a question or like to learn more about you and your work out at the DePaul University, please fill us in. What should that individual do?
Probably the best way to contact me is through the university. So I'm, listed as a faculty on the Department of Psychology website, so you can find me there. That has my contact information, my office telephone number, my email, and that's a good way to get a hold of me. And I've published work as well, so if you're interested in some of that, I've written a bit on older adults. Most of that research was on reverse mortgages because that's another vulnerability for older adults. Mm-hmm. I've written a lot about the sort of sales techniques that are used, how salespeople can mislead people's attention. So I've published a lot. So if you're interested in that, you can find that. Just go to Google Scholar and type my name out, and you'll find my work there.
Well, Dr. Choplin, I think we're going to, if you don't mind, we may have to have you back sometime to talk about those sales techniques, because I'm sure I think of older adults where someone is in the neighborhood and they're putting a coating on the driveway across the street, and next thing you know, those people are going around to all the houses in the neighborhood of older adults and getting them to put up the cash because, hey, since we're here, we'll do a deal with you, and we'll do your driveway as well. And next thing you know, all these folks are putting the money in the pot and not getting the work done.
Yeah. Or worse yet, taking out a predatory loan.
Yes. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. So. But Dr. Choplin, thank you so much for your time today, for being with us, and for your guidance on such an important topic.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening to today's podcast. Be safe.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to follow One-on-One with Walt Laskos wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to send comments to walt@laskoscommunications.com. And to learn more about how you might support the prevention of elder financial scams, visit laskoscommunications.com.